Let's start with the Buffalo Bills. Their offseason in 60 seconds. Extended Josh Allen to a monster deal that he took less than he probably could have. Greg Rousseau, 4 years, $80 million, $54 guaranteed. Christian Benford, 4 years, $69 million, $38 million guaranteed. Khalil Shakir, 4 years, $53 million, $30 guaranteed. Terrell Bernard, 4 years, $42 million, $24 guaranteed. Free agents, Josh Palmer, 3 years, $29 million. Joey Bosa, 1 year, $12.6 million. Michael Hoyt, 3 years, $21 million. He's suspended for the first 6 games of the year. Ty Johnson comes back on a small deal, and then smaller deals in free agency for Larry Ogunjobi, Trey White, and Elijah Moore. Draft picks, Maxwell Harrison, the cornerback, 30th overall. He's been dealing with a knee injury in camp. TJ Sanders, defensive tackle in the 2nd round. Edge rusher Landon Jackson from Arkansas in the 3rd round. Defensive tackle Deon Walker from Kentucky in the 4th round. They lost Mac Hollins in free agency and traded Kaiir Elam. With each of these teams, we are talking about what we're most excited about heading into the season. Derrik, why don't you kick us off? What are you most excited about watching with the 2025 Buffalo Bills?
It's got to be the offense that has the MVP playing quarterback. I think that that's the easiest place to start. And it's not just that Josh Allen is an MVP caliber quarterback, right? Like, I think there's a chance that on any given Sunday, he is truly the best quarterback out there. But it's not just him. Like, he's obviously running the show over there, but they also have, like, I don't know what, the 3rd best offensive line maybe in the league. I think in certain ways, like, maybe the best. They have a very unique left tackle. They have an interior that has played very well. Spencer Brown on the right side has been really good for them. We spent like 3 years talking about, like, oh, the Bills need to figure out how to learn how to run the ball. And then they finally did last year. And what we got was a Josh Allen MVP season where he doesn't even need a star receiver and he can go out and do all this stuff. And so to see what Josh Allen has become pre-snap, to see what he's become as a decision maker, still being one of the nastiest runners in the NFL, on top of stuff being able to get taken off his plate in terms of down and distance with how good the run game is, it's just, this offense is a fire-breathing dragon, and they're probably going to be that again.
We all had a similar answer to this, Dave, when we were talking about before we were planning the show. Every single one of us was just excited about what this version of the Buffalo Bills has become on offense, including a quarterback like Derrik alluded to that is kind of seeing the matrix right now. Like, him and the decision making and the lack of turnovers. He's always been somebody that didn't take a ton of sacks. The lack of negative plays combined with the high end stuff from Josh Allen very much feels like a happy learned how to putt sort of moment for the Bills, and I think we realized the benefits of that last year.
He's seeing the matrix, but he's also still an American bison, right? Like, he's still Josh Allen. Like, he's the great white buffalo, guys. Like, he's so fun to watch, in addition to having unlocked that extra layer where he's really seeing the game purely. And if that wasn't all exciting enough, I'm at least optimistic that some pass catchers can take a step this year, right? Like, go down the list, whoever you want, but there's room for optimism that this can be a better pass catcher group. Derrik, you mentioned it, dude. I blew my own mind when I looked back at the Bills' stats last year and realized that their 2nd leading receiver had like 650 yards or something like that. Like, he cobbled it together. And so if the offense can take a step from where it was last year, which was amazing, it's just pure adrenaline. I can't wait to watch it.
We'll talk about the pass catchers here in a little bit. That's one of my answers to one of the categories that we're going to talk about. But in discussing this with people there, they actually love the fact that they don't have one of these guys. And I know that's something that you have to kind of rationalize when you've built the team this way. But this being an offense where the ball can get spit out to anybody at any time, they think it actually is an advantage for them because you're not having to worry about force feeding one person. There is a certain amount of flexibility in the way that you can approach individual game plans. It's not on Josh Allen's mind. And having Steph Diggs is obviously a benefit, but this idea of if I haven't thrown this guy 3 or 4 balls in the first quarter, I have to start doing it. That was just completely ejected from the mindset last year, and I think they reaped some benefits from that. You still want really good pass catchers, and we'll talk about which of those guys could take a step, but in their minds, this is actually sort of a good thing. And when I look at the transition from the 2023 offense to the 2024 offense and why they've become this on that side of the ball, Derrik mentioned a couple of the individual players, like the transition and the development from guys like Spencer Brown becoming like an excellent right tackle. And you have that in Deion Dawkins. The line overall was a very good group. Ty Johnson is like a specifically important person for this team in the way they use him in passing situations. James Cook leveled up last year. There are personnel things that are driving this. But I think some of the structural things are, to me, what are most impressive. They didn't do any jumbo in training camp last year. I was asking about this when I was there in August. They did none of it. And then over the course of the season, they ran 148 plays with 6 offensive linemen on the field. That was the most by far in the NFL. They also led the league in yards per play on those plays. They had 888 yards on 6 offensive lineman plays last year. No other team in the league had over 344. So that's like an in-season thing where you see them morphing into something else. I think over the course of last offseason, as they were transitioned to this run-heavy team, in 2023, the Bills had the second widest formations in football. They were in spread looks on almost 34% of their plays, which was like the third highest rate in the league. Last year, they were in spread looks on 21% of their plays, according to Next Gen, which was dead average. This was just a different sort of offense led by an MVP quarterback, and I think we really started to see them reap the benefits of that.
Because now they can oscillate. Like that was
Yeah.
always the contention of why when they couldn't run the ball is like, well, they can never really do any of this stuff. Now that they can, and Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, is still there, and they're going to have continuity to build on this stuff. So it's incredibly exciting all around.
For each of these teams, we're going to talk about the swing points in their season. Where could this year pivot for all of these clubs? Dave, let's start with you. What is your swing point for the 2025 Buffalo Bills? This is a sicko answer, and I'm really excited about it.
Okay, but important context is that I'm not being a sicko for sicko's sake.
You're really not.
I think this is the type of stuff I think you have to consider when you're talking about what we all view as a slam dunk Super Bowl contender. Like, barring a catastrophe, the Bills are going to be playing late into January. The goal is to go further. So my swing point is the special teams and whether they will improve with a change at special teams coordinator. They fired Matthew Smiley after the playoffs. They replaced him with Chris Tabor. Chris Tabor sat out of the NFL last year. He was with Carolina and he just took a year off, which is very interesting because, hey, guess who's a sicko? Every special teams coordinator in the NFL. So to have a year to sit and watch and do sicko, like study the new kickoff and how it works and what advantages might be gained. That's the type of stuff that they do. So I'm really intrigued to see what the Bills special teams look like. It's not sexy. It's not going to be exciting 15 out of the 17 Sundays of the year, but we know this matters, man. I mean, they were bottom 5 in net punting last year. They had bottom 5 opposing starting field positions. So opponents were starting drives against the Bills on their own 31, which again was a bottom 5 number in the league. Much more famously, they had a punt blocked by the Rams in a game that they lost, a shootout that they lost by a touchdown. Who knows what sort of difference that makes? And I don't think it ultimately affected anything, but they famously had 9 men on their return team in that Rams game at the end of the game. And it's just like, what are we doing? And that stuff like that is why you wind up making a switch at a coordinator position after a trip to the AFC Championship game. So I'm curious to see how well Chris Tabor shores all of that stuff up. And when you're talking about a team that could win 13 or 14 games, that stuff matters to me. And I guess I'll throw in as well, I don't think I'm ready to say that Tyler Bass is a liability, but 5 misses last year with all of them coming from 49 and in. So like we're not talking about a ton of like really difficult kicks. He did have a miss in the snow game, I believe, against San Francisco. But 49 and in is easy peasy by modern NFL standards. So maybe not a liability, but I have a close eye on Tyler Bass. And for all of those reasons, I'm curious about the Bills' special teams.
What I love about having 3 people on the show is that eventually, every once in a while, we're just going to have things inserted into the conversation that I never would have gotten to in a million years.
No,
and
not even a little.
Chris Tabor as the special teams coordinator is one of those things. And why this is important is when you were a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl, every little edge on every single margin matters. And this team finished 28th in special teams DVOA last year. And Bills fans know that it's going to be the slimmest of things that eventually get this thing over the top. And special teams are absolutely a part of that, even though we almost never talk about it on this show, probably as a bit at this point.
If I brought this to the table for like 30 of the 32 teams in the league, you should rightly tell me to screw off. But I think this is a team where it fits.
For me, it's what this defensive line turns into. That is my swing point for the 2025 Buffalo Bills. They threw an astonishing amount of resources at this group this year. No huge, like big money additions. They didn't use a first round pick on it, but you think about the number of bodies that are now involved in this pass rush rotation this year that weren't last year. Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, TJ Sanders, their second round pick, Landon Jackson, their third round pick, Larry Ogunjobi, somebody they signed in free agency, Deone Walker, who they drafted in the fourth round. We have 6 new guys who could potentially be a part of this rotation this year. And I don't blame them after the way that last year went. Their pressure numbers were fine last year. Like they were average when bringing 4. They actually had the second highest pressure rate in the league per next gen when bringing 5. But when you watch them at the end of last season, you could feel that they were not affecting the quarterback in the way that they wanted to. And so the group that they brought in this year, Derrik, we've got a ton of different players stylistically, and that's not an accident. You know, Joey Bosa can win in a variety of ways when he's healthy. Landon Jackson is a long, straight down the chest sort of rusher. Deone Walker is a 6'8" mountain of a man that they're really excited about. Like they thought he was much more talented than a fourth round pick coming out of Kentucky. He is somebody that struggled his final year at Kentucky with a little bit of a back injury, but really flashed in 2023. And so they're really hoping that they can go 6 or 7 deep here. And when we get to January, they've got the horses up front to affect the game in ways they just couldn't by the end of last season.
It really is like a bunch of different guys with different body types and skill sets. Like Joey Bosa is your always have had really good hands, and when he's at his best, can really win around the edge in a way that you want. And I think this team in particular needs among the rookies. Landon Jackson is the one I'm the most excited about. I think he has some stuff to him. He's stiff, like he's not going to be like Joey Bosa where he can turn the corner, but he's long, he's strong, he's a really good run defender already, and he like even in college he showed it, and then even in the preseason he's shown some of it. Deone Walker has shown some of that as more of a nose tackle. TJ Sanders is like, you know, he's a little bit on the smaller end for a defensive tackle, but he's got some quickness to him that I think is really valuable. So I think to me, the one I'm most excited about is Landon Jackson. But if Walker hits, I think that helps them piece together some of their run game stuff, because they are not a team that wants to throw some of these, you know, blitzes and early down blitzes. They want to just be able to defend with their normal box. Well, if Walker can play well, then that really helps them do that.
I think it's a great point because there's not a lot of beef on this line. That's the one thing when you're looking at all the bodies that they've added. They don't really have a lot of space-eating players. That's never the way that they have built their front. If Walker can be more of a contributor in year one than a typical fourth-round pick would be, you have a massive person that you can drop at that one technique next to Ed Oliver, and then hopefully that's going to help you hold up a little bit. One area where this team gets by, even though they don't really have those bigger bodies, and think about even their second and third level, they don't have a lot of thumpers in this group. But one thing that stands out when you watch this team is that they are phenomenal on the edge when defending the run. Greg Rousseau is so long, and you drop in somebody like Landon Jackson. This team was 7th in the NFL in regular season rush success rate on defense last year per next gen. It's kind of counterintuitive when you think about their body types, but I think some of the work that those guys do on the edge is one of the reasons they hold up a little bit better against the run than you might think given how they're constructed. I still, in the back of my mind, am a tiny bit worried about when you get to the best teams in the league trying to run downhill against you in January, can you hold up? Like the Ravens had a 60% rushing success rate in that game last year in the divisional round, but over the course of the regular season, they have shown a consistent ability, despite how they're built, to be pretty solid in run defense.
I don't want to put too much hype on a third round pick, but Landon Jackson's a really fun player. I'm glad we spotlighted him.
He has a unique skill set, and you can deploy him in a very specific way. And I think that's the goal with this, is that if we have 5, 6 guys that do something well, even if it's a little bit limited, collectively, we have a group that we can feel good about. And I think that's how they've built this thing. For each of these teams, we're going to talk about what is keeping us up at night about their chances in 2025. Derrik, why don't you get us going? What is keeping you up at night about this year's Buffalo Bills?
The secondary at large, but like I was going to say primarily cornerback too, but I think it is a little bit of everything. Like Dane Jackson has been fine for them at times. You know, he's been on and off the roster for them.
This was like 3 years ago that Dane Jackson was fine for them. You could be worried about the second cornerback spot for the Bills. It's okay.
Their other corner is a guy who was previously good for them and has not been for like 3 years in Tre'Davious White. So like they're going back to a lot of old friends that I'm not sure are really going to solve the cornerback 2 problem for them. And then at safety, they're running back a lot of the same guys. It's all of the same guys that they had last year with some trio of Taylor Rapp, DeMar Hamlin, and Cole Bishop. And I think, we talked about on our X Factor show, it would be really nice if Cole Bishop stepped up and was a really good player for them. And I think he's going to be starting for them in a way that he wasn't last year.
He is. He's
I'm
definitively
not
the second safety for them.
right. I'm not confident that he's going to be that much of an upgrade yet. And that's not to say he can, but it's just like I think until I see it, it's gonna be a long road. So this entire secondary, like I trust Benford to be a really good player. I really trust Taron Johnson. The other three spots, I'm a little iffy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody at this point is trying to bring back Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I think we're comfortable with that ship having sailed, but good safety play has made such a difference for this team over the course of its run. And yeah, you have to be worried about that. The cornerback spot for sure, but I think probably because he was a pretty marquee pick, like a second round pick in Cole Bishop. My eyes go to him because I have high expectations for him. He came out of Utah too, which low key has a really good reputation for developing defensive backs. So I
My guy,
have high
Jalen
hopes.
Johnson.
There you
Jalen
go.
Johnson, Julian Blackman I think he's with the Saints now, but he's had a nice career. Like, I have high hopes for what this guy can be, and safety play in Buffalo has been such a big part of their success. So it's something that I definitely worry about. And while I was prepping for this, I again blew my own mind. You guys realize, and maybe you do, if I'm lacking on this, that's on me. The Bills are the only team in the league since 2020 that's been top 5 in takeaways all of those years.
So
They
I was
lead
going to mention this.
They lead the entire NFL in takeaways over that stretch of time. Since 2020, they're better at it than everybody else. They're better than Pittsburgh, they're better than Dallas, and for the most part, they're substantially better. Like, they take the ball away a lot, and that's despite not really having that all-pro ball hawk 8 interceptions type of player. They just do it with guys getting their hands on the football. So if somebody like a Cole Bishop or a Maxwell Hairston or whoever, if they're not holding up their end of the bargain on that could make a difference for a defense that's gotten used to doing this every year.
So I was going to mention this when I was going to talk about what I'm watching for the first month of the season. I have my doubts about them being able to take the ball away at the same rate again this year compared to what they did last year. And especially when you combine it with what happened on offense, this team had a plus 24 turnover margin last year. It's 8 better than any other team in football. The Steelers were second at plus 16. That's not going to happen again. Like, that's just not going to happen. They're probably not going to create as many turnovers on defense, and they're probably going to turn the ball over more on offense. So that's something to keep in mind. And on the defensive side specifically, this team was 24th in defensive success rate last year. They relied on turnovers. And
they were bad for a long time.
If
like,
they're
actually
not,
bad.
If they're not turning the ball over at the same rate this year, and down to down, we're getting similar sort of results from the defense. What does that mean when we get into the back half of the season? That's not keeping me up at night. That was what I was watching over the first half of the year, but I think it's absolutely worth talking about. Like, we just think of the Bills as this good defense. Like, oh, they'll be somewhere between the 7th and 12th best defense in the league. That was just not the case last year, and they really survived on those turnovers. If that comes back to earth a little bit, and we still have these questions about the secondary, and there's, just overall personnel-wise, they don't have that many star-level players, and you're trying to win a Super Bowl, what does that ultimately mean?
I'm kind of done. I'm not done with that defense because they could be fine, but, like, I'm a little bit done talking about them until I can see them get punched in the mouth and get up off the mat. Like, we've just never seen it even at their best, and I'm still a little bit worried about that.
And I just think that this defense, there are elements of it that are really dynamic and almost chameleon-like on the back end. They disguise on the back end as well as any team in the league last year. Only the Rams and the Vikings per next gen played more two high coverages out of single high pre-snap alignments than the Bills did last year. It's very amorphous, and they make it hard on the quarterback. But there are other elements of this defense that are a little bit predictable and a little bit stale. Only the Niners played more four-man fronts last year, and the Bills were 24th in the league in success rate when playing man coverage. Just think about when they tried to do it last year against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Benford being hurt was a huge part of that, but Kaiir Elam, or a similar analogous player to Kaiir Elam, is probably going to be that second cornerback this year. Like, the whole hope was that Maxwell Hairston would be that guy, and unfortunately, you talk about Cole Bishop, the same thing happened to Maxwell Hairston that happened to Cole Bishop last year. He gets banged up early in camp, and even if he can get healthy early in the season, this is a defense, because the back half is so complex, that it's going to be really hard for him to come in and hit the ground running. So there's a chance we're relying on Trey White at this stage of his career or Dane Jackson because they're probably safer bets. And I just worry about the overall ceiling of this defense if we have enough component pieces where that's the conversation.
I think that's fair. I'd be remiss if I didn't say this though. And I think this all makes sense in the context of we know where the Bills are trying to go. But one thing I think you can count on for the Bills is, at least for the last 2 or so years, there's been a stretch where they were beat to shit. The defense looked hopeless. And you're sitting there saying, like, how are they going to get out of this? And by God, don't they slap it together with duct tape and get there? And that
But they
doesn't,
slap it
that,
together against the Dolphins in week 15.
Yeah,
They don't
that's-
slap it
yeah.
together against the Chiefs in the AFC
Hey,
Championship game.
I don't
That's
care.
my
I don't
concern.
care about November.
You're totally
anymore.
right.
November doesn't
to-
matter.
You're totally right, but I mean, you gotta be in that game in January before we can worry about how good you are at dealing with the Chiefs. That's all.
So I kind of flipped my what is keeping me up at night and what I'm watching in the first month of the season. So I'm just going to move these two. What I'm watching in the first month of the season with the Buffalo Bills is what steps the young pass catchers take, right? I mean, how does this group come together? We talked about it a little bit at the beginning where they're fine with the fact that they don't really have that guy that they can rely on. But this group needs to be more than the sum of its parts. And I do think that some of these really highly picked players that have to become difference makers for them, does that happen? In their minds, Dalton Schultz and Keon Coleman were both trending in a really positive direction last year before they got hurt. Keon Coleman had his 2 best games of the season against the Titans and the Seahawks, and then he gets banged up, and he never really got back on track. Dalton Kincaid was having a pretty nice year. He gets banged up, never really gets back on track. So their hope is if those guys can stay healthy, we will see better versions of them this year. And then you drop Josh Palmer into the mix here, and even if he's not a star, his skill set, Derrik, specifically, where he can separate a little bit against man coverage, that is the one guy on the perimeter that they haven't really had as part of this equation. So collectively, even if we have no stars here, can the young guys take a small step, and can Josh Palmer be enough of a differentiator where we feel really good about this group as a whole by the time we get to the end of the season?
Yeah, and like the nice part about it is like if they really don't, it's still probably a top 6 offense, right? Like you have Josh Allen, the offensive line, they're probably still going to be really good. But I do think again, this is a team where you're talking about like what are the margins when we get to the middle and end of January, and it's like
Exactly.
we kind of need Keon Coleman to be the red zone threat that we thought he was going to be when we drafted him. We need him to be our kind of third down. In my mind, he is a little bit of like what Jawan Jennings, like he should be a little bit of what Jawan Jennings is for the Niners, like that style of player. And if
It's
he
actually a
can be
good
that,
comp. Somebody that doesn't need to separate to necessarily be
Yes.
effective.
And I think he's got a little more pop to him with the ball, like in the ideal case, but like similar style of player where like that's what you're getting out of him. And then Palmer is just your bigger downfield X, which they have had in Matt Collins in the past and Gabe Davis and stuff. But like Palmer is a little bit more consistent, I think, than those guys, but he also still brings a lot of the blocking and stuff that you got from those guys. So if we can just get 5 to 10% better play out of a guy like Palmer than we got from guys previously in that role. And then Coleman can just give you a little bit more of those pop plays, those one-on-one wins that you want. Then I think this offense can pretty easily, we say they're going to turn the ball over a little bit more, and that is probably true just based on how well they didn't last year. But if they can also get a few more explosives by virtue of these 2 receivers stepping up and hopefully Kincaid being a little bit healthier, that probably makes everything come out in the wash.
And Derrik, I know you were paying attention to what steps the young players would take over the first month or so of the season. We talked about the pass catchers, talked about Cole Bishop. The other guy that I know they're very excited about and the steps that he's taken, and they're hoping that we can see a similar sort of jump in year 3 for him that we saw for Spencer Brown, is O'Cyrus Torrence. He has had a very nice training camp, and he's somebody that's like, all right, now it's his time to be the guy when we get to week 11 and we're talking about these Bills offensive linemen that are really flashing. Is he the guy that's getting the Spencer Brown treatment in 2025? In their minds, that is on the table.
That would go a very long way for them. Because I envision him a little bit of the same way that we got from like the best of Mekhi Becton last year, where it's like, okay, in pass pro, he can be a little bit slow and he's going to reach on stuff sometimes. But in the run game, if he can get hands on you, he's moving you. And especially with some of the double teams that he's putting together with Brown, if he can clean up a little bit some of that stuff with being a little bit too slow to landmarks or being a little bit slow in pass protection, and he becomes a little bit more stable there, and you get all the pop, I mean, he's going to become one of the best guards in the league, hopefully.
I was watching him in one-on-ones, and obviously, that's a crapshoot. You're there for one day of training camp, but just how confident he was in some of the hand usage stuff and just the nuances of his game that I think have really started to develop and sharpen. I was very impressed with what I saw when I was there, and that's the story that they've been telling all throughout camp. For each of these teams, Dave, we're talking about what a successful season looks like. What is a successful season for the 2025 Bills?
You don't need me to say it, but I will. I mean, the Bean McDermott Allen Bills will be measured by their ability to reach the Super Bowl and preferably win it, but you at least got to get there. We all know that. My question for y'all, what significance does beating the Chiefs play in that? Like, obviously, Bills fans are going to take a championship no matter how they get it, but do you feel like doesn't it have to involve a win over the Chiefs finally, just for poetic justice? Like, Manning finally beat Brady in '06 when the Colts won that Super Bowl. Like, you kind of got to slay the dragon, in my opinion. Like, take it however you can get it, but I feel like a Bills Super Bowl run needs to involve that win.
The only reason I say no is that he will inevitably have to go through Burrow or Jackson. Otherwise, like, if he doesn't have to go through Mahomes, and like that to me is good enough that I'm like, I'm not really getting tripped up over it.
I don't think anyone will care in Buffalo. I think
Yeah.
that is the most beautiful way that it can play out. Like, if they don't end up getting the Chiefs as part of that playoff run, I think part of me would be a little bit upset.
Put it this way, Bills fans will be ecstatic no matter what, but it will be it would just be seismic if they finally pulled it off while defeating the Chiefs. I think it would put it on another level than just any Super Bowl.
I don't want to be too fatalistic here or too alarmist when it comes to the construction of this team, because I think they showed us last year that even if they're dealing with dead money, even if it looks like they might be taking a small step back, when you have Josh Allen, you're always going to be in the mix. But if you look at their 2-year outlook here financially, they're already $9 million over next year's cap. They can save some money if they move on from Dawson Knox, but if they do that, then they lose their Y tight end that allows them to do some of the stuff that they do in the run game. So you're chipping away at that. David Edwards and Connor McGovern, their left guard and center respectively, are free agents after this year. They're hoping, I think, that they can bring back one of them, but I think affording both of them is going to be a little bit tough. And so again, you're just starting to slowly chip away at the elements that have made you into the offense that you are. So this year feels like a ripe year as that offensive line is there. They've stayed healthy over the last couple years. This is the type of group where, all right, we feel good about the push we can make. And that's it. If they don't win the Super Bowl, or at least get to the Super Bowl, I think that everyone in Western New York is going to be a little bit sad about how this season went. Thanks for watching The Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.